I'm in Hermosa Beach, California, and I'm at the Old Radio Collector. It is a store, the only retail store in Southern California, where you can buy an old radio, get one serviced, you can buy one reconditioned, you can buy an old one that you can fix up yourself. You can't believe what went through my mind and my heart when I discovered this store for the first time. Finally, after all these years of collecting radios, I found a store. Well, we're going to meet Jack Dempsey today, and I also want to welcome you to another in our series of programs on radio collecting and restoration. My name is Mike Adams, and for the next half hour, we'll be back in time. Let's go inside and meet Jack Dempsey, the Old Radio Collector. In the years since I taped this segment, the Old Radio Collector store has gone out of business. Still, Jack Dempsey was a pioneer in old radio retailing, and this is how it was.
I think you can hear what I was talking about earlier. That's why we like to put filters in before we even get started. That's typical of a filter hum.
Whisk away all thoughts of any other sale. Only at Angelus will you find over...
I wouldn't strip it and refinish it.
No,
I'd
think
just wax it up.
Can you replace the fabric, or is it?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
Really
An additional to the 45,
sure.
It'd be about, well, $55 barring anything unforeseen should give you a good-looking radio back.
I'm still in it way under what the going rate seems to be. You just don't see these much anymore.
No.
You used to see them at swap meets and garage sales, and you don't find them very often anymore that way.
And it's probably going to be in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 weeks right now.
That's all right, then. We're not depending on it for entertainment at home, frankly.
Okay, if you want to fill in the top for me. Well, actually, I got interested in old radios years before anybody else did, in the fact that my grandfather was a radio repairman up until about 1960. That's what he did, is repaired radios. Well, of course, I wasn't allowed to touch a customer's radio, you know, a nice new $200 radio. So I got to work on the junk, like this one. You know, at that time, they were junk. People brought them in and said, well, here, you can have this, and I'm going to get me a new RCA. And so these were laying all over the shop, old battery sets, breadboards that people would give a right arm for today. Were typically laying around. So I used to play with them, see if I could get them working again. As we get older, and meaning everybody, you want to hang on to a piece of the past. Well, most everybody that is alive today grew up in the radio generation, and it becomes a distinctive part of their past, and they want to preserve a piece of that.
Beauty.
The final act of the play.
And the Beast. How are you, Mike? Glad to see you here. First of all, the beauty I was referring to was a rather early Art Deco radio, which I've just been fortunate enough to find. And we have a couple of small ones here that might interest you. This, as you know, I'm an actor and I pick stuff up all over the country wherever I go. This happens to have come from
They offer free inspections and
a picture that was done in Iowa, Fist, when I was out there. I found this in a flea market.
Dubuque, right?
Right outside of Dubuque. And, oh, by the way, that's Alba Francesca.
Hello, hello.
And I'm Jimmy Karen. Can you see the, is the beer bottle in focus there for a minute? I can't turn this one on because this is a great favorite with children. And actually it turns on in the back here. And it, you get your stations, your station selection is up here. But the kids were here for Christmas and they just went absolutely crazy and they played it. So I'm afraid it has to go down to old Jack Dempsey at the Old Radio Collector shop for a little bit of work, unless you want to do some work on it while you're here.
Right now.
Why don't you talk about how you got into collecting radios? Why do you collect radios? How did you get started?
He needs to. He wakes up certain mornings and there's a look in his eye, and I know he's going to be searching for a radio that day.
Even before I started to collect the old ones, I had a yen for new radios. And we have an awful lot of those in cupboards and hiding away in various places. But there was a time when I really needed to buy, I would go so long and then I had to buy a radio.
It's the search that makes it so much fun. It's like any type of collecting. It's the thrill of finding a treasure. That's part of why we love to travel. We combine traveling with our treasure hunts.
Where do you go to find a radio? Do you?
Don't tell him, Alva. Don't tell him.
We go anywhere and everywhere, all over this country. If we're traveling abroad, we look there.
By the way, the Transoceanic was one of our first antique radios, and I know exactly where we bought it. We were driving from New York to here in 1975, and we found a Transoceanic radio in Santa Fe. You know, one of the things that fascinates us is that I can turn this radio on and we can listen to the Metropolitan Opera broadcast today on a machine that was made 50 years ago. And I think that's kind of marvelous.
I found this beautiful Atwater Kent in my cousin's basement this summer while I was on vacation. And it belonged to my grandfather, which was very exciting to me since he purchased it brand new back in 1932. This is a picture of my grandfather, and he probably purchased the radio right about the time this photograph was taken. My mother said that he bought it brand new in 1932, and at that time it cost about $65, which was a lot of money back then. And she said that it sat in the living room in a certain spot in the corner for all those years until it ended up in my cousin's basement. They used to sit around and listen to old radio shows, and she felt it was a very good radio, that it was always their favorite. Here's a little portable I found from the 50s, a German radio and transistor, a real gem, and it works. It's beautiful.
Such as the Kauai Beach Boy Hotel or the Cocoa Palms Resort. Winners fly between Los Angeles and Honolulu aboard a United Airlines 747 and enjoy Royal Hawaiian.
This would be what the old radio collector could take to the beach.
My favorite part of radio collecting is the swap meet. And today we're on the road with Jack Dempsey and Hank Hartfield at the Long Beach Veterans Stadium. As usual, I'm looking for bargains.
This one here, whoever would buy it, first of all, it has push buttons, and I heard that with push buttons it's more valuable. Mm-hmm. And it's got a nice wooden case, and it's got both knobs. But whoever is interested is going to buy it either for the parts or he's going to buy it to fix it up.
It's an old radio that from Jacksonville. It's missing the tubes. It's a definite fixer-upper.
For how much?
How much? $5.
I'll buy it from you.
Sold.
It's a 1926 RCA, and inside it's beautiful. It's I've never seen one this well preserved, considering as old as it is. Look inside and see how clean it is.
Tilt it for us so we can...
Yes.
Beautiful blue tubes in there too.
Oh yeah, oldies. At the time these came out, that you would have clubs, different clubs that would see just how many. They had a contest to see who could get the most stations. Used to be WILW in Cincinnati, then KDKA in Pittsburgh, KGO out here in California. And they'd get together and they'd keep a log about the different stations that they'd been able to get. And it was something else. And it was a day, too, of Gene and Glenn, Forget the colored, the blackface people, you know what I mean? Huh? Amos Nandy, yes, Amos Nandy. And there was a lot of other people would see each other in the morning and they say, oh my, I got this station last night, or I got the other station, maybe 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 miles away, depending on conditions. So on weather conditions.
It starts with the bugler blowing reveille over your bed when you arrive. Jack, that's the G.I. Jive.
It's got the same style, but the front end is
like that? Or that?
That's not it either. The wood goes like that, but it's down the bottom.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what you can do is I can bring the knobs down for these two here, and you can take them and try them. If they don't fit, you can bring them back.
I just say to people, be cautious, because Hank and I have been in this business a long time, and we know the days of good buys are very slim today. Most of them of this vintage are very marginal radios.
Somebody's already been in, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, or they have serious problems. Can't be restored.
20 years ago, I started picking up a radio here and there, and I brought them back here, and I sold them for around $5 or $10 a piece. And I collected radios for many, many years, and then I went into selling radios, and I found out that the Zeniths were the easiest to fix. They were the best playing radios, and you could get more money out of them, and they'd sell quicker than any other kind of radio. So that's what I started doing, was collecting Zeniths. Now this is a what they call an organ-style radio. It's made like an organ. It's a 1939, and it is one of the first Zeniths that they put FM on. Now this does have FM on it. Okay, now these are the famous 38 radios, 1938 radios. That's when Zenith made their best radios, and they made the most radios. In other words, we were coming out of a depression, and they knew that there was going to be a lot of radios sold, and they really made some good radios. This has the magic eye. It also has the split dials. This is a gold dial. This is a blue dial for the short wave. This is your motorized dial. Then you fine tune it. I can get it back on that good station there. Now this magic eye shows you this is your tone button.
The first amateur radio club was formed in 1909. 2 years later, a high school boy named Don Wallace was on the air.
As a boy in high school, I was interested in radio, of course, 1910, and I became a high school student in 1912, and of course the radio laws came in, and neighbor Ham told me I ought to get a license, so I did. The license was nice and easy. He said, get a slip of paper and write, I can send and receive 5 words a minute. Take it down to my dad's bank and have it notarized. And so I had the notary down there stamp it, mailed it in. That was my examination. So they sent me a call in 1912. Well, in a couple of years I had a radio telegraph license, and I wanted a ship job and got one in the summer.
Young Don Wallace became one of the most important radio operators in history when he served President Wilson
on an historic mission to Versailles in 1919.
On the George Washington, you want me to talk about President Wilson. Well, the peace ship, they so-called, was after World War I, and the big four went over there, the French and the English and the Russian. I think that was what they were, to determine the peace terms, the Treaty of Versailles. We pulled in there with this presidential radio. Now, the reason I was put in charge was kind of odd. I was ready to be discharged at the receiving set Brooklyn. There was 450 operators there. I wanted to get back to school, back to college. So I was there to be discharged, and here was an officer came up to me and said, "Don, you're from the West Coast. What do you know about arc transmitters?" I said, "There's nothing to them." "Oh, you're just the man we want. We're putting a big arc transmitter on the George Washington, 40 kilowatt, and we can't find anybody that knows how to run it." And I said, "Well, there's nothing to it." "Well, you pick out the 36 best operators you can and go on board and be the presidential communication system." So I worked hard there. I had a couple days, and I picked out 36 best operators out of 450. I was still a teenager. President Wilson used to enjoy kids. He had been president of Princeton University, and he liked boys, so we were all boys. Teenagers, 20, 21, and 22. There wasn't anybody in radio that weren't young because the old people couldn't figure it out.
A big part of amateur radio was building your own equipment. This is the way it was in the 1930s.
Okay, I was sending about 20 words a minute there. I've been in amateur radio for 50 years, starting in 1934. Retired from Hughes Aircraft Company about 6 years ago. After you retire, you start reliving your early days, and one of the things I wanted to do, therefore, was rebuild amateur radio as I knew it back in the 30s. And I often thought this was the most interesting part of amateur radio, when you built these things yourself. So I went out and collected authentic parts and built things just like the ones I used to have. The first one I'd like to show is an exact replica of my very, very first amateur radio transmitter. This is the main tuning coil of 1/4 inch copper tubing, and this is a Cardwell capacitor from those days, which does the tuning to determine the frequency. And this coil, which is variable in terms of getting closer to the other one, picks off enough antenna current to get up into your antenna. Your antenna is coupled from here and out. These are the binding posts which attach to filament and plate voltage supplies. The typical 1935, 36, or 37 station would have this transmitter and would have what was known as a national FB7 receiver. It was one of the earliest super heterodyne receivers. This one is a particularly good restoration job. It's almost like new, and it plays like new too. So it's a nice remembrance from those times. And again, this setup, National FB7 receiver, the 47210-203A transmitter, represents a high spot in terms of a real fine amateur station of, let's call it, 1935.
Well, this is a little mobile transmitter from the 50s called a Messner signal shifter.
Next week, we'll continue to look at old ham equipment at the TRW swap meet.
You know, this thing really brings back memories. This is a World War II vintage Hammerlin Super Pro receiver. I had one of these when I was a kid, too. Built late in the war. Covered, this particular model covers the AM broadcast band through 20 megahertz. And it's a typical super heterodyne design from the period. It was a very high performance receiver, one of the best used during the war. Now, these aren't the original knobs down here.
Wayne Overbeck, who will be our guide at this most famous of radio swap meets, also talked to Don Wallace about his vintage station.
What we have here is a classic radio station, really, because in addition to the usual things you'd see in a ham radio station, Collins S lines, kilowatt amplifiers, and all those kinds of things, we have all of these transmitters. Some of them predate World War II. We've got antenna coupling circuits, open wire feed lines to go to all the different rhombics that Don has. We've got switching, so you can switch from one rhombic to another instantly to point it from one direction to another. I take it this is how you tune these antennas.
They're all tuned up, so don't touch them.
I won't change the tuning down. And you've got link coupling, and I take it RF runs around in these open wire lines.
Well, these transmitters are handy because they're broadbanded to all 18 directions. I have the very latest and best transmitters over here. These Alpha one-tube amplifiers are FCC approved and probably the best thing you can buy. I use these normally, but in a contest, these aren't practical because you have to retune when you change direction, you've got to retune the reflected power.
In 1940, Don Wallace purchased the Press Wireless radio station on Palos Verdes Peninsula, where he remains an active operator. In his 75 years on the air, he has received hundreds of awards for long-distance communication.
I took public speaking in college because it seemed to me that that would help you do interviews for this TV. Anyway, we had a lot of fun with the radio. I haven't had anything but pure fun all my life. It's just been great. I just can't imagine. I'm 86 now, and I've just had the time of my life. Every minute, the whole world has just been so nice.
Do a little alignment on the pointer. That's probably KMPC right there. We use that a lot because it's a nice, strong station. Kind of align the pointer to 710. At that station, now we can change stations and see what the true alignment of the radio is. Usually, if you buy a working radio, you can't get in too bad of trouble. It's when you buy one that you don't really know what's going on with it and kind of not able to play it that you get in trouble. You find there's a lot more things wrong with it than you ever anticipated. Probably one of the biggest mistakes or biggest cons on sellers is they'll turn the radio on and show you that it plays and you'll buy it. Just about any radio you can make it play. That don't mean that it's a good radio. It could have a lot of problems. You can take particularly like in this area, you can tune in KNX on the telephone and you'll have be receiving a station. And it can be very deceiving. So I recommend if people want to buy a radio and at all possible, get it turned on, leave it play 10 or 15 minutes and see what it does. If it's still playing, then you're pretty sure you got a good radio.
Have you been to the Rose Bowl swap meet?
No, there was one.
Yeah, there's one every Sunday, I guess, or every other Sunday. I've never been there.
I did swap it. I'm broke, so.
Well, I am, and I just haven't been to one. I like to go to shops, but this is actually better than the shop because you can do it all. And this is like 100, 200 shops, you know. Stuff out here.
My great Art Deco. This one is $20. I'll split with you. 15.
Cheers.
You got it.
Totally serious. Thank you. I love it.
One for you, one for me.
That's okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I like this. I'll put this in my bank account.
What this box is here is a 1939 Rockola. It's a predecessor to a box that they call the Luxury Light Up. The box itself is a collector's item. As somebody who's into antique jukeboxes would take this box as a collector's item. It's a rare box because you don't see too many of this style of box around. The box that's sitting next to it that's on a dolly is a model 1428 Rockola made in 1946-47. This one has been converted to play 45s. It was one of the most popular boxes that Rockola had during what they call the golden age of jukebox. These are two of the boxes during that golden age. The age starts basically around 1938 and goes up to 1948.
It's original finish. I don't know if I mentioned the year. It's around 1909.
What prices are we talking about on these?
Oh, they start anywhere from $3.75 on up. Yeah. Now, this is the eyeball catcher here. This is a Model D. It's all in quarter sawn oak, including the horn. It's what is referred to as a spear point horn by the design in the wood itself. It's a very unusual piece. It's a 78 player, and it's a little on the rare side.
Well, if you remember, about a half an hour ago, we started this week's show at the Old Radio Collector store in Hermosa Beach, and I followed Jack Dempsey, the Old Radio Collector, all the way out here to the Long Beach swap meet, where you can see all of the radios in the background. But there's an added bonus to this today. I did manage to find some radios, and this is kind of a lesson to people who are into radio restoration. And I guess the lesson is, if you want a radio that works, that you can play, that you can get stations on that will last forever, then you need to buy it from a man like Jack, who guarantees it and works on them. But if you're like me, and you want to spend just a few dollars, you can get some junk radios. Now, these are truly junk radios. I paid $10 for this one, $5 for this one, actually, $10 for this one, and this one was given to me free. And I know, because of my skills in restoration, I can make them decent radios. But it's pretty good. I paid a total of $15 I spent here today, and I have 3 more radios to add to my burgeoning collection of junk radios in the workshop. Next week, we're going to visit the Southern California Antique Radio Society swap meet and meeting, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. My name's Mike Adams. Have a good week and happy radio collecting.